You all coffeeed up?
No, why?
Has anybody else noticed that apparently Scandinavia now includes the United Federation of Planets?
Yes. Job I wouldn't did.
So I'm so happy to be here at this second Furry Studies conference. It is amazing to see how many people have come here, not only in person but online, and it's an amazing event. And I want to thank you all for being here, and I want to also thank PLU and our tech people who have just been doing an amazing job. So, thanks again. I'm sure the local church group is easier, but we're more fun. So the next presentation is going to be about Eurofurence, the tale of the traveling convention, which is an unusual situation because, as Rod could tell you, there was a time when many conventions just had to go from hotel to hotel, and figure out sort of what was happening. But Eurofurence was from the beginning planned as a traveling convention, and you don't want to hear me talk about it, so let's listen to Tim Stoddard talk about it, and thank you very much.
Thank you. So, just a brief introduction to myself. My name's Tim Stoddard. I study and write about furry history, specializing in the UK. But for this talk, I'm focusing on Eurofurence and the big furry convention in Europe. So, Eurofurence is an annual furry convention that takes place in Germany. In September of this year, it held its 31st iteration with over 6,000 furries in attendance, which not only makes it the largest furry convention outside of North America, but also the longest running furry convention in the entire world. While almost every other convention has a city or region they call home, what made Eurofurence unique is in its first 10 years is that it was originally a traveling convention, like how the science fiction fandom has Worldcon or Eurocon, taking place in a different parts of Europe each year. At least that was the plan, which is the subject of this talk. So the fandom of Europe wasn't as organized in the early 1990s as they were today. Then there were no conventions, and social media in those days were bulletin boards, news groups, and online text games like Multi-User Dungeons and Mucks. Around 1993, Tess Tweeha went on a news group board and commented on a TV airing of Raw, an 80s American comedy film about a family constantly under attack from lions in Africa. It was a massive cult classic in Germany. At roughly the same time, another German furry going by Unki Nainen had also commented on the same news group board about the same TV airing, and the two became friends. They emailed each other and played on FurryMuck. Then in 1994, Unki had received messages from Tess, but not from Germany, but in the UK. While the UK furries didn't have conventions at the time, what they had were house cons, where several furries spent a weekend at someone's house drawing, reading comics, fanzines, watching animations. Tess was attending one called UK FurCon, which is held at the student accommodation at the University of Essex Colchester, with access to the computer labs to play FurryMuck. Unki, realizing there was more furries in Europe than he imagined, started messaging around newsgroups and mucks, creating a directory of Eurofurries. And when he clearly saw how many, he and Tess planned an in-person meeting of European furries at Tess's family vacation home in Kaiser Wilhelm Kug, north of Germany. They originally planned to have 10 furries, but ended up with 10 German, 5 British, 1 Finnish, 1 Dutch, 1 Danish, and 1 Swedish furry. So, as far as I could find, there was no declaration or charter stating that the newly created Eurofurence was to be a multinational traveling convention. However, we have public comments from the two founders and other furries who attended the first Eurofurence, but there was at least a verbal agreement among those who attended that it should be held in a different European country each year to keep the convention both fresh and include furries from all across Europe. They had already made a great start. Furries discussed on the newly established Eurofurries mailing list that Sweden should be the next country so that more furries in the Nordic countries could attend. Unki reached out to furries from his directory, and 2 furries who studied at Linköping University stepped forward to host Eurofurence 2 at the campus's student organization building in 1996. Attendance increased to 35. More activities were on offer, such as a video room to watch furry films and a martial arts demonstration. The two students, Divine Vixen and Snout, would later be made guests of honor at the first Nordic FuzzCon, not only for hosting EF2, but also their work on the Furry SPR MUC and their involvement with the Veland Central Library, which is one of the first online furry art portals. When it came time for EF3, the newly formed Eurofurence organization, or EFO for short, made up of German attendees and led by Cheetah, decided to centralize the discussion process so furries could suggest anything from location, dates, t-shirt designs, etc. to one place. And if there were more than one viable option, then all options would be voted on by the furries. So this was a robust democratic approach to organizing a convention, but it did require furries to provide worthwhile input. For EF3, there was only one viable option submitted by the Eurofurence for a location, a primary school in the German town of Bingen. Unfortunately, communication with the school wasn't as thorough, as the school had to close on that agreed weekend, fully booked at other times, causing the EFO to hurriedly locate and book a campsite in Bodstedt 4 months before Eurofurence 3 was meant to happen. There were a lot of emails around the time that I've read, especially from Cheetah, that were very rough, as he had to argue against rumors and negative feedback from the furries in like the mailing lists. Then it came to EF4. And the EFO was a lot more prepared and had a venue in Kassel in mind. But several furries were reluctant to go back to Germany again, including German furries like Unki, who wanted to see EF in a different country each year. Given that the EFO had less than a year to plan for the next Eurofurence, they announced that a venue in the German town of Kassel would be the next location, but extended the location deadline to a few more weeks if anyone had any better idea. That's when the Dutch furries came in. So Samarindus noticed a friend of his admits to missing the deadline due to work and school obligations, and decided to research the Dutch Office of Tourism to look for venues that met the EFO's criteria. He arranged a vote on the Eurofurence mailing list, he inspected the site, and proposed the Fern de Journe site in Hees. They did such a good job that the EFO dropped their plans for Kassel and helped Samarindus and his team of Dutch furries host Eurofurence 4, which had 97 attendees, and was praised by all despite the Dutch furries having virtually no experience running conventions before and becoming incredibly stressed as a result. So for the next few years, Eurofurence would be hosted in Germany. There was a campsite in Muggelsee, near Berlin, a youth hostel in Göttingen, a castle in Kirchen, and another youth hostel in Oberbernhardt. This would get the convention to gradually earn the nickname of German Furrence, mainly from furries who were outside of Germany. And it wasn't like those furries didn't try. Since EF4, the UK had tried multiple times to get a venue in England up for a vote, but they were always rejected because the UK in the summertime was an expensive place for tourism compared to mainland Europe. Meanwhile, the Netherlands and Sweden were able to propose venues that were both suitable and affordable, but they would get outvoted each time. There was also the EFO's registration as an Eigentragender Verein, which makes them a legal entity with plenty of benefits to handle finances, access business accounts, save money on running events. But those benefits weren't recognized outside of Germany. That didn't make running Eurofurence outside Germany impossible, but they would have needed more local support in order to do so. So in the lead up to EF8, the German Furrence drama blew up in the mailing lists and message boards. Now, the popular retelling of this event pinned the blame on French furries, but from what I could find, this is most likely inaccurate. French furries had talks amongst themselves about running a furry convention in France back in 2001, but this was a purely independent effort, and prominent French furries at the time don't recall one of their own like raising up a fuss. What I did find, however, was heated arguments about how Eurofurence locations should be voted on, kick-started by one of the original organizers of EF4 in the Netherlands. They wanted the voting to focus on the country and then the location, instead of both at the same time. And while they were met with opposition, there were those who sided with them, arguing not only how furries outside of Germany lost out financially and felt demoralized seeing their hard work proposing locations go to naught, but that the original intent of Eurofurence was to be held in a different country each year. So, prior to EF8, the EFO made a massive call offering any and all proposals for a location for EF9. In the end, there was only one submission of note. Jamargo and Imbala were furries from Czechia. They built a website detailing their proposal for a sports camp in the rural village of San Pose. There were legal issues, but Jamargo had the knowledge and the resources to resolve said issues and assure the German organizers that it would work. The sports camp itself wasn't to the same standard that previous venues had, and the language barrier between German and Czech meant the EFO heavily relied on the Czech furries for communication. There were more issues once the location was announced. Germans had a pretty low view of Czech people at the time, and there was fear-mongering about crime and poverty from former Soviet countries. So a lot of German furries just didn't want to go. So for reference, the attendance count for EF8 was 260, and the final attendance count for EF9 was 165. That drop in registrations meant the Czech team needed to put in extra work to budget the convention, and the EFO relied on donations and advertisements to avoid the convention operating at a loss. Let's also mention issues with equipment during the day. Maybe in the Q&A section, one of you could ask about the electrified tent or the Paw Pet show. However, Jamargo and Imbala's team were able to help the EFO all the way to make the convention work, avoiding financial troubles and even getting wireless internet access to work. At the very least, those who ran the convention at the time have since looked back fondly of EF9. While there were proposals to host Eurofurence in the UK and the Netherlands and even Estonia, the Eurofurence organizers wanted to avoid further risks and remain in Germany. Once they announced that they had renewed their contract with Nuremberg Castle from EF11 to EF12, it was clear that Eurofurence was no longer a traveling convention. As you can see, since 2005, Eurofurence has held their convention at a single venue, only moving when the attendance figure has outgrown the current venue. The Estrel Hotel in Berlin, especially, was the largest hotel in all of Germany at the time. So they remained there for 8 years, only moving to Hamburg's convention center in 2023, allegedly due to rising hotel costs and disagreements with management. So based on my research, I've narrowed down 3 reasons why Eurofurence struggled with this traveling con model. The first issue was time, meaning time to organize a convention. Eurofurence had, on average, a single year to find a location, reach an agreement with the location, and then plan the convention itself. In fact, I noticed in the messages there was being a gradual push to start planning Eurofurence earlier and earlier to give themselves more time. The next issue is that, with few exceptions, every Eurofurence was organized by a team primarily composed of German furries. The team was dedicated and worked well with its resources, and worked with what they knew best, which was their home country. The key reason why EF2, EF4, and EF9 were held outside of Germany was because of a set of local furries who were as dedicated as that team when it came to finding locations and working with the EFO to get the convention to work. In contrast, other traveling conventions like Worldcon and Eurocon take at least 2 years to plan conventions, and the Central Committee doesn't have as direct involvement in planning the convention as Eurofurence did. The last issue and the key reason why Eurofurence no longer hosts outside of Germany anymore are legal reasons. This is partially due to it being an EV, but mainly the paperwork of transporting equipment and dealing with liability, which requires more work in understanding laws in different countries than the one you're familiar with. Fortunately, the demand for a traveling convention waned. The main reason for such demand was a lack of a furry convention in other European countries, and by 2003, there was a shift in how that demand was being met. France, after seeing a furry convention in Czechia was possible, went ahead and held Furkeley, its premier furry convention. The UK eventually got their first convention, Confuzzled, which plans were first discussed at Eurofurence 11 at Nuremberg Castle. Czechia knowing a convention is possible in their own country, started holding their own conventions, and many more countries started hosting their own furry conventions. Back in the late 90s, Eurofurence was considered the only furry convention in the continent of a considerable size, and now there are over 50 conventions, camping trips, fair dances, and other events across the continent. So running a furry convention is a challenge that becomes increasingly arduous as more furries wanted to attend it. Running a furry convention that changes annually is even more daunting when you consider changing countries. There was a demand for the concept. Attending a convention whilst visiting a new location each year has its appeal, but it is a concept that comes with much work. Fortunately for them, the demand for a traveling convention decreased as furries generally accepted that Eurofurence would remain in Germany indefinitely. And Eurofurries instead favored another idea, running a convention of their own. Now there are several options to choose from. Who knows if there will ever be a country hopping furry convention, but for those who love to travel, it's a great time to be a furry in Europe. Thank you for your time.
Okay, thank you very, very much. We're going to go a little bit out of order now, so if the Furkeley folks can come up and do their thing. We're going to hear Keep Furkeley Weird, a case study in queering the face of academia. I could speak slower. Keeping Furkeley Weird. No, I go slow. You keep going fast. I won't try to introduce them all, of course.
I hope everyone's enjoying the conference so far. Yes. I love the diversity in the presentations that we have here, especially the artists. Shout out to the artists.
Go and hold the mics closer to your mouth.
Shout out to the artists.
Woo. Can you guys? Oh. Oh yeah.
Logical fallacy, logical fallacy.
Ad hominem.
Ad hominem.
Oh, we can get started now. Okay. So hello, we're the Furries at Berkeley, as I mentioned. So we're a club on the campus of the University of California, Berkeley, and we're going to be talking a little bit about our club experiences and kind of what it means to run a furry club on a university campus. So for some quick introductions.
I'm Shane, I do urban studies. I'm Wolfire, I do data science.
I'm Iris, I do applied mathematics.
And I'm Hunter, and I do plasma physics. And that's a lot. It's a big range there. So we're all students. We all study a wide different number of things, but we're all together because we all like furries, and we wanted to help build a club and this community. And it's also not just us four. It's not even just everyone who's an executive. If you want to raise your hand, yeah. But it's a big community, and we receive help from people all around the Bay Area. It's an amazing thing. So how do we get started?
All right, so we can focus on UC Berkeley as a campus, and especially the students. Our campus acts as a launch pad for a lot of movements and organizations that represented counterculture to whatever they were facing at the time. On the left, you can see in 1964, this is Say Their Gate on our campus. This is a group of students protesting for the free speech movement. Looking in the middle, we have in 2017, an anti-Trump protest on campus, protesting against the Trump administration at the time and the rising scare of fascist ideology within our country. And then on the right, you can see around 2016, we had the Berkeley Kink Club founded, where it taught
Education.
Yeah, it had kink education. And so all of these examples and many more represent organizations and movements on our campus, specifically run by students that fought the status quo during that time.
We love you, naked guy!
Alrighty. Well, with that fact, how exactly did our club start? If you could clink it again. Well, how it actually started, it was formed back in spring of 2022. So our club is actually very young in the Berkeley organizations. And this is all thanks to the fact that we're so proud of just being furries. And a good example of this was actually Carbon, our alum, who's on over there. He actually wore their Berkeley lanyard to a local meet, and they were able to meet other Berkeley furries, and that's how they ended up forming the club. For me, this was actually bringing my fursuit to my dorm unit, and my friend who I met over the summer actually told me, oh, you should apply to Furries at Berkeley, and you should reach out. And so I did. And they told me, oh, if you'd like to help, can you help us table? Which tabling is actually a very important part for Furries at Berkeley, especially when it comes to promoting. And in Berkeley, we had this opportunity where we can table openly because of, as mentioned, the free speech movement. We actually, on campus, are given a year-round open space on, it's called Upper Sproul, where we can just be out there and do whatever we really want. And protests are held there, organizations table, and our university promotes this by giving us a table and chair.
Yeah, and so when we talk about tabling, the Furries at Berkeley, we kind of have our name ingrained for the things that we do while tabling. A lot of this stuff is done to reduce kind of the barrier of entry that we see a lot to getting into the furry fandom. So a lot of the time you see these people on the internet, but you really never see a fursuiter while you're trying to get to class. And so having the opportunity to just walk up and give a high five to someone, or have a lot of our talented artists who will just sit at the table and be like, hey, what do you think your persona will be? That? Okay, wait, let me draw you as that guy. Here you go. Have fun. Keep going to class. Stay in school. A lot of these interactions here are just very minute. They're not big commitments for people who have never seen the furry fandom or anything like that before, but they give us a taste of what it looks like. And that really helped our club expand pretty rapidly.
And we'll continue with our club expansion. As Hunter said, this increase in tabling expanded our outreach to students, furry and non-furry alike, and that allowed us to have opportunities for collaborations on campus. On the left, sorry about that, you can see our very first collaboration with Superb, which is an organization on campus specializing in student events. This was spring of 2022, so very early on in the club's existence. In the middle here, you can see the Daily Californian. That's a local newspaper, and they did a deep dive on our club. And on the right, you can see our most recent collaboration with our student union on campus called Craft for Noon. It was an opportunity for students to come together. Oh, you want to say the attendance?
We got over 300 students at that event.
I'd say that's not a small amount. But it was an opportunity for all students to come together and create a cute little craft for free, which is really great. It brought people together, had people asking about what furries were, and I like to believe it acted as a sort of exposure therapy for students on campus, because I know people that aren't familiar with furries, or maybe they're only familiar online, it can be a bit daunting to see them in real life, or they have these pretensive notions about them, and these opportunities allow us to clear those up.
And then, with that in mind, of course, we're very younglings, so we wanted to have guest speakers come to our campus where they can actually talk more about the community and more of their experiences, because we haven't been able to explore into the community as much. And a great example of this is Spoticus. They actually hosted a masterclass where they were given a chance to choose a topic and just talk about it to the Berkeley community. And as you can see, we got worldwide recognition, some distasteful ones, but especially from our current senator from, yeah. And these posts are not the first types like this.
Yeah, so the masterclass, the video of our masterclass that went viral is kind of one within many different posts of ours that went viral, amassing up to 3.4 million views on one of the reels, which is kind of crazy, but it essentially cemented furries, whether it was positive or negative connotations, but a lot of positive connotations for Berkeley students, just within the culture. And for example, at our game day, furries are a part of game day. And it kind of creates this almost legend of furry. two different sides to this. You know, we're getting both people inside and outside the fandom. For people inside the fandom, they're seeing this really open celebration of furry on campus, and they're like, I want to go there. I'm applying to Berkeley specifically so I can be in this really fun open community. I think we have like 1 or 2 freshmen this year who were like, I chose Berkeley because of the furry club. And also, you know, students who are outside the fandom almost see this like Legends of Furry, and I use that because like the non-furry perception really is like, you know, this is very mystical, and like people are spotting the furries and being like, oh my gosh, that's the pink one I saw on TikTok. Can we take photos together? I've taken photos with you since every semester. Or even like outside of Berkeley, I had my friend from UCLA be like, oh my gosh, you're going to Berkeley? Did you see the blue and orange one? I did see the blue and orange one. This is before I was a furry. But with this mysticism, this like mystical perception of furries, I think there's still this sort of distance and like mystification between furry and non-furry, which is pretty interesting.
With that factor, tabling has been a great way for a bunch of people to ask us questions, but of course we're limited on what we can say in public. And especially when people come and ask us questions, they're usually asking us between classes, so they gotta run in like 2 minutes. So we gotta answer those questions really fast, which because of that, I felt like we should, or like just in general, we felt like we should host an academic setting to have these questions answered, and overall just research into the community and have a deep dive for the Berkeley community, which is why we formed the class.
Yeah, so this was a really big step for us. What a decal is a faculty-sponsored student-taught course. So we had to go to the Gender and Women's Studies department and say, hey guys, you should give out units for what we're about to talk about. And then this is kind of a pretty big step. Creating a decal means that a lot of this stuff is getting public. Decals are very famous for getting attention from right-wing media, a lot of criticism. So putting ourselves out in here made our public perception pretty clear, and we had to be very careful about how we do that, hence the name Digital Subcultures with Anthropomorphic Identities. We couldn't really call it the furry class. They got a little mad at us for that. But it allowed us to explore a lot of things in depth. This allowed new students, people just coming to the university, to take a course where they could hear about a lot of the things that presenters actually were talking about. We talked about like music in the fandom, gender, economics. We had our economics lecture 2 weeks ago. A lot of things like that, which are really important, that we actually were able to get the space to talk about, not just for furries and people in the community, but also for people outside just curious about what it's all about.
Yeah, and kind of talking about that class and exploring what is beyond, like our impact beyond just like the club and the campus. One thing is this overlap between the furry community and queer and trans culture. And how a lot of the sort of stigma that furries are facing is really inherently linked to a lot of discrimination that is against like queer and trans and neurodivergent communities, and a lot of hate that is masked as like, oh, cringe culture, or like culture wars, like the litter box debate, where it's just really used to mask different forms of hate, and really using our platform rather than there's a tendency within queer communities to say, okay, if people think that queer people are weird, we're gonna say we're not like them, and we're gonna push them down so we can go up. Rather than doing that, we're saying like, yeah, you know, we are weird, and we're going to uplift the sort of like weird or queer communities so that we all are uplifted together rather than this like scramble to the top and dragging each other down. And one example of a way we've used our platform that we've kind of amassed through social media and stuff is these posters made by our lovely exec writer as part of a campaign. A campaign we collaborated, or we were invited to collaborate on against a right-wing speaker on campus, and kind of talking about the future of the club. You know, we've kind of been expanding how we can create furry space on campus, even if that's something as simple as like a sunset hike we did. And we've done a lot to really bring visibility to the furry community, but there's kind of still work to be done because, as I talked about earlier, there's this mystification or this perception of just the suit, the furries in the suit, or that furries are acceptable because they're secretly rich or they're secretly hot or they're secretly like a scientist. And bringing awareness to the fact that there is a full human and this really complex and interesting social and cultural community behind it all, and that there are topics worth researching and conferences and classes and academia and all these deep discussions. And so kind of trying to create that space in which we're making people feel like they can openly and welcomely talk about this and demystifying everything.
So we're going to end off by just saying thank you for the Furry Studies Conference for inviting us to do a little panel. And it's worth mentioning that, especially starting a furry group in the Bay Area, we stand on the shoulders of a lot of giants. And one of those giants in particular was Spotticus, a great friend of the club and our actually first masterclass lecturer. They unfortunately passed away earlier this year, and we like to dedicate our presentation to them and for helping us all throughout today.
And follow all our socials at Berkeley Furries. Follow the Tumblr.
Oh, thank you so much. So I was trying to think about actually how we're going to handle the question and answer session, and I think if you guys just take a mic and you don't have to come back up here if you don't want to, or maybe one of you could come up and you can mouth whatever the other people are saying or something.
Yeah.
Yes, right. So thank you very much. We're going to move on to an organization I'm sure that many of you have heard of, which is Furscience. And actually, I have a question for you. Hands up, how many people here have taken one of their questionnaires at a con? Oh, well, okay, just in general. In general. Yeah, it's a fair number. Not a lot, but a fair number, yeah. So, of course, Nuka will be going into all of the details here, but they have been doing a longitudinal study of furries for at least 10 years, I think, for a long time anyway, and have become really very important in the furry studies field. So without any further ado, I would like to introduce Courtney Plant, Nuka.
All right, so let's see here if I can manage my technology and not screw this up in front of a bunch of people. All right, is this working? Can people see this? Yes. Success, okay. First of all, I just want to say thank you for being here on Halloween. I know that for me, I can hear trick-or-treaters at my door right now. My roommates are taking care of it in fursuits, and that's what I'm going to do as soon as I'm done with this session is go out in fursuits. But thank you for being here. I'm really excited to be giving this talk. Very humbled to be giving this talk because, holy crap, some of the heavy hitters that came before me earlier today make me feel very out of my league here, especially as a quantitative researcher here. I have to point out as well that Ian said earlier with great pride that there were no numbers in that talk, and unfortunately there is math and numbers in this one. I apologize in advance. I'm a quantitative researcher, forgive me, but I'll make it interesting for you, I promise. So my talk is called Anthropomorphizing Animals, in a response to a hostile world. As was sort of mentioned, I'm Dr. Courtney Plant. I go by Nuka in the fandom. My furry credentials are that I've been a furry for 18 years, and I've been doing research on the fandom for 15 years. I've got a PhD in social psychology, so that's the approach I take to my research. Some of you have heard of the Furscience team. I am but one of many members of the Furscience team. So Dr. Stephen Rayson, Dr. Sharon Roberts, Dr. Kathleen Gerbasi, and myself are all founding members of the Furscience team. In addition, the research I'm talking about today is also done in conjunction with Duncan Piasecki, for whom who contributed one of the studies in this for their master's thesis, and their supervisor, Dr. Janice Moodley. I should also mention that the research that I'm talking about today was literally on Wednesday just accepted for publication. So this is hot off of the presses, literally about to make it to press in the next few months here, but it's been accepted. So that's pretty exciting for us as well. But the plan for today is just to run you very quickly through the requisite literature for the rest of the talk to make sense, so get you up to speed on the main hypotheses, to talk very briefly about 4 studies that comprise this paper and what they have to tell us, and then sort of contextualize it all with some implications and a few conclusions as well. And then I think the Q&A session is coming after that. So I guess to start, I want to preface this by making the bold claim that humans are a pretty pathetic species when you get down to it. We are not particularly strong or particularly fast. From an evolutionary context, it's remarkable that we're still here. And the reason we are is because we are a tribal species, right? Everything else on the Serengeti kicks our ass. But the fact that we can kind of band together and work together and share our knowledge of tools was what gave us a competitive edge. And so baked into the crust of being a human is this instinct to want to belong to groups, right? We have this innate, insatiable need to want to belong to groups, to want to surround ourselves with fellow humans. In fact, we have an aversive response to not fitting in, right? When we're off to the side, when we're bullied, when we're ostracized, we feel that aversively, right? A low self-esteem is tied to this not belonging, and we do what we can to get rid of that feeling. So we're compelled to want to belong to groups. Premise 1. The second premise is that we have these wonderfully wild parts of our brain, like the fusiform face area, which is responsible for helping us recognize faces. So much so that we sometimes overshoot it a little bit and see faces in things that aren't actually human. In fact, we regularly anthropomorphize our technology. If anyone's ever yelled at their smartphone or kicked their car and yelled at it because it wasn't working, a lot of yelling and shouting at technology as if it can hear us, right? You understand the idea of anthropomorphizing something that's not human. We give human traits to our pets, right? We talk to them as if they can understand us. We ascribe personality traits to them, and they do have personalities, let's be real. But we anthropomorphize them. We give them a lot of human traits. We see a lot of human in them. And we do this for all matter of reasons. Sometimes spiritual or existential reasons, right? We understand where we are in the universe by comparing ourselves to non-human animals. Again, for neurological reasons, we do this. We look at animals and see so much of human expression in them. But the reason most relevant today, and that combines with that first premise, is that we anthropomorphize the world around us when we get lonely, right? A human who's separate from the tribe and who's seeking that belongingness, who craves that association with another person, well, they turn to the non-human. They'll take it where they can get it. Right? They've done studies to show this. One of my favorite ones uses the Clocky alarm clock. Some of you might have heard of Clocky. If you're not a morning person, Clocky is your arch nemesis. Clocky, when the alarm goes off, doesn't just ring, but the little wheels spin up and you have to chase it around the room. It's a way of forcing you to wake your ass up. And people anthropomorphize Clocky. In studies, they found that people will shout at Clocky and talk about Clocky's having this like, oh, Clocky wants to make my morning miserable. Clocky has no volition. Clocky is a little computer program running on a piece of hardware, right? We do this with pets as well. The more lonely people are, the more they talk to their pets, the more they ascribe human traits to their pets. And we don't just do this willy-nilly. We benefit from this. So studies have shown, for example, that bullied children will turn to their pets and find solace and comfort in their non-human animal pets, right? There's something to the idea that when you're lonely, when you're ostracized, finding comfort in something not human is something that we naturally do. And so when you put all this together, you get the hypotheses for our studies. There's a few of them. The first hypothesis is that people who are bullied or ostracized or otherwise on the outs with humanity should find greater tendency or desire to anthropomorphize non-human animals. And hey, I hear there's this fandom called furries who are comprised of people who have an interest in anthropomorphizing non-human animals. So we thought, well, maybe in furries in particular, we might find some kind of a link between being on the outs with humanity and being particularly interested in the concept of a fandom built around this interest in non-human animals and anthropomorphizing them. And also the trappings of that, so fursuits or having fursonas. And those in turn, we thought, well, if you are identifying with non-human animals and finding kinship and fascination with them, well, that should in turn make it feel like animals got your back. Animals are there for you. They're your kin. They're your brother when other people turn away from you. So we think that maybe that will in turn be associated with felt kinship or in-group identification with non-human animals. Kind of a bold series of claims to make, but we tested it, as all scientists do. So we ran a series of studies, the first of which we ran at 2018 in Anthrocon. So if you happen to be there, maybe you got one of our surveys, your data might be in this analysis. So we did a combination of both online surveys and old-fashioned pencil paper surveys as part of one of our larger studies that we were doing at the time. And what we measured in this survey was, first of all, do you have a negative regard for humanity? So do you have like a negative view of humanity? Do you look down cynically at humanity, suggesting maybe you're on the outs or maybe you've been hurt by humans before? We also looked at, hey, how much do you identify? How strongly do you identify as a furry? How strongly do you identify with your fursona, with this anthropomorphized non-human representation of yourself? And also, do you feel a sense of bond or kinship with animals? And I'll spare you the ugly statistics, but when you run this model, you find this significant link between the more you have this disregard for humans, the more you identify as a furry, the more strongly you identify with your fursona, and in turn, the more strongly you feel this connection with animals. So this is consistent with the hypothesis that we had. Now, one study doesn't mean anything. One study could be a fluke. This was taken at a North American convention, so maybe this is just a weird North American thing. Also, we didn't actually measure bullying or ostracism. We just measured this sort of disregard for humans, which is not quite the same thing. So it's sort of what we'd expect, but it's not a perfect test of it. So this is where we have research from a South African group of furries. So in this case, this was part of a master's thesis project by our colleague Duncan Piasecki. So this is work being done for their master's thesis. And so they essentially did a conceptual replication of what we did at Anthrocon, but instead of the disregard for humans measure, they actually put in a measure of, have you been bullied? Do you have this history of being bullied when you were younger? And then instead of asking, do you feel a bond with animals, we actually included a more direct measure called the inclusion of animals in self. So it's literally two concentric circles, one that says you, one that says non-human animals, and there's a bunch of different ones of varying degrees of overlap. And we said, how close do you feel to non-human animals? And so that was the measure of, do you feel like you have this sense of like you and animals are kind of one and the same? And again, we found exactly the same association, right? So this history of being bullied in particular was associated with stronger identification as a furry or interest in anthropomorphism, and that in turn was associated with greater identification with a fursona and ultimately with greater tendency to include the animals, non-human animals, in your sense of self. So this is consistent with study one, replication is good, and we've now got a sample outside of North America suggesting this isn't just a weird American thing. But you could argue the sample size was fairly small. It was only about 100 people compared to the more than 1,000 people in study one. So let's do it again. So we ran a third study, this time at Furry Fiesta down in Texas. And we tried to go all out for this one, right? So not just in terms of the number of participants, which was a pretty good chunk, 600 is pretty darn good. But also we tried to add additional variables. We really wanted to see if we could test a bunch of the implications of this. So in addition to the measures from before, we also assessed directly your tendency to anthropomorphize animals. Not just are you in a fandom full of people who do this, but like specifically to what extent do you see human traits in the non-human animals around you, in pets, in animals at the zoo, in animals out in the wild, right? We also asked directly, to what extent do you see animals as part of the same group? Not just the overlapping circle, but like explicitly, when you think of us, do you lump animals, non-human animals, into that category? And again, an even more elaborate statistical model, but we found every single link in that path there, right? The history of being bullied is tied to anthropomorphization of non-human animals, is tied to fanship in the furry fandom, is tied to fursona identification, is tied to including animals in your sense of self, is tied to your tendency to consider animals as part of the same group as you. So that's pretty remarkable, if I do say so myself. And if we stopped it right there, I think that's pretty darned impressive. But I want to show off a little bit. I want to flex just a little bit more, because we found this in furries. And let's be real, in most of the world, no one cares about furries, unless it's to complain about them. So we wanted to go one step further. What if this isn't unique to furries? What if we could find this tendency in non-furries. Enter study 4. Undergrad university students, importantly, none of them furries, right? So we asked them in a survey study, right? Now we dropped some of the furry specific variables, right? The average person does not have a fursona. The average person who says they're not a furry will say that they are not a furry. So we dropped those items specifically. But what we asked about was specifically, do you have a history of being bullied? How much do you anthropomorphize non-human animals in your day-to-day life? And do you consider animals part of your in-group? And would you look at that, you find that same tendency there, right? People who are on the outs with humanity, people who are ostracized, who are lonely, not only do they tend to anthropomorphize non-human animals, but this is associated with a tendency to feel a kinship with animals. So what's the implication of this? Well, for one thing, I want to argue that furries are weird. Let's be real. Furries are absolutely weird. But this might not be, funnily enough, the tendency to anthropomorphize non-human animals might not actually be the weirdest thing about us. As it turns out, as people have pointed out, humans have been doing this long before furries were a thing, right? It might not be the most uncommon thing in the world, right? Non-furries do this sometimes to cope, right? Especially if you've been bullied, if you've been ostracized, if humanity seems kind of shitty, isn't it kind of nice to turn to a fantasy or turn to stories that feature non-humans being kind of nice, right? There's a comfort to that, right? Also, there are some implications. We live in a world that's becoming increasingly fragmented, right? We just came out of a pandemic when people were forced to quarantine for over a year, and we saw that made a lot of people have some real problems with their social lives. The fragmentation of society, the suburbanization of society, as we build these enclaves and wall ourselves off from the rest of society and retreat to social media, right? We're getting lonelier and lonelier. So maybe it's not a surprise to see in the future that there's more shows, more media, more stories, more interests among furries and non-furries in the non-human and the anthropomorphization of non-humans. Now, just to be clear, the study is far from flawless. There's all sorts of problems with it. There are no perfect studies. It's a cross-sectional design, so because of that, we can't prove causation, right? We can't prove that maybe the tendency to anthropomorphize came first and led to you getting bullied or being ostracized. If you ask me, gun to my head, I'm guessing it's a bi-directional link, that maybe the kernel of the interest was there. You get bullied, which only drives further your interest in it, which only pushes you further away from people. Also, it would have been nice, and I'm kicking myself in hindsight for this, for not including some kind of behavioral measure of animal welfare. I would have loved to have been able to put the pretty little bow on the end of that study and say, hey, not only do people care more about non-human animals when they've been ostracized from humans, but they'll donate more to animal charities, or they'll spend more time volunteering for animal charities, or they'll go the extra step to try to help out non-human animals. I think we would have found that, but I didn't think to measure it in the study. Ultimately, it would also be nice to replicate it one last time in a much larger, more international sample. Our most recent study took place at Eurofurence this summer. We got over 1,000 furries from a whole bunch of different countries. We didn't put any of these items on there. It's certainly something we can do next year, so maybe keep on the lookout for that. And I guess I just want to wrap up by saying what this study does not show. And it does not mean to suggest that all furries or anyone with an interest in anthropomorphic animals are somehow lonely or bullied. I don't want to make the argument or trivialize anyone's interest or say, well, that's just because you were bullied or you felt disconnected from humanity. Not at all, right? There's many roads to Rome, right? This just maybe for some people, right? Maybe it resonates with you that, yeah, I didn't have a lot of friends and I found comfort in non-human animals in that. And for some people, maybe that resonates with their experience, but by no means is that the common or only furry experience out there. It also suggests something that we've been arguing for years, which is that furry is more than just a hobby. Furry is more than just that thing that we do to kill some time on the weekend. It's functional. It fulfills all kinds of psychological and identity and creativity purposes for people. And this is just one on a long list of functions that the furry fandom fulfills for us, right? For some people, it's their self-expression. For some people, it's their muse. For some people, it's a source of social support. And for some people, it's the thing that helped them cope with bullying, or a thing that helped them to find comfort in a hostile world. And I think there's something sort of brilliantly ironic about the fact that we sometimes find more humanity in stories and fictional worlds with non-human animals than we sometimes do in our fellow humans. And I guess I'll leave it on that point there. Thank you so much for listening. If you're interested in any of this work that we do at Furscience, you can go to furscience.com. You can download our book there for free. And I think maybe we're onto the Q&A. I'll let the moderator tell me if that's the case.
Yes, it is. Thank you very much. Thank you. Thank you very much. I'm very sorry to report that due to circumstances beyond our control, we will not be having the talk from Iran today. So great regrets for that. However, it does mean that we have longer for Q&A and longer for coffee. So, you know, friendship and drugs, two great things.
And if
So
that's
I'd
not
like
what
to start
Furry's
off-
about, I don't know what it is.
So I see we have one in the audience, but I'm going to start off with one from online. And this one is for the Berkeley folks. So if anyone wants to grab a microphone, or all of you want to grab, go ahead and sit up here if you want. I mean, why not? And grab a microphone. Is that it? Oh, you got it? Okay, cool.
Does this work?
Yeah. Go ahead and make yourself comfortable, you know. Put your feet up. For the Berkeley folks, and it's from a fellow UC Davis alum. What's their mascot? Do you know? Go Spiders. I don't know. As likely the most well-known furry club on a college campus, do you help other campuses set up furry clubs?
Well, isn't that a beautiful question?
Anyways, can y'all hear me? Okay. Technically, yes. It's mainly done through our umbrella organization called the AAAA, and this is all possible because of Carbon, who actually goes and does research about every if a university asks about, oh, how do I start my club? They go in and do the research of how to do that, which is crazy. I couldn't, but Carbon goes and gives them like a starter pack of how exactly they can form a club. Because for Berkeley it was very easy, but in other universities it's really hard. But Carbon does all that, honestly.
Was there anything else? No, that's it. Carbon, actually, are you still doing this? And is this okay? Could you give some contact information? Come on up and. Yeah. Well, how could somebody start a club at their campus? Well, come up here and talk. Oh, okay. Okay, there's a QR code at the display table, so we'll come back to you in just a minute. In the meantime, I saw there was one from Rod. Oh. Oh, this
microphone? Uh-oh.
No? Yes? Would one of you like to come up here and just summarize it? Well, I could summarize, I suppose, which is that yes, the answer is yes, they do help other people, other colleges set up clubs. The person to contact is Carbon. Carbon is getting a QR code here. I don't know how we'll handle that, honestly. Is there a URL or something you can give? Yeah. Come up here and tell them. Come up. No, don't tell me. Tell them.
It is more of a question for our tech team. Rather, what would be the best way for me to display a QR code or a link? Yeah. I have this QR code here. I can send you a file. I can send you a link.
What's the link?
It's a QR code.
Okay.
That I can bring up the link, but my
Can we
computer's
give your Telegram address or something?
Yes.
Okay,
That also works.
go ahead.
Oh, you want my Telegram address?
Yes.
Oh, just Carbon_the_wolf. Yeah.
Okay, there we go. Thank you very much.
You're welcome. Yeah. And for the, I guess, physical attendees, this is an example of what some of our chapters have accomplished. It is next to the comm books on display. Yeah, feel free to check it out. The QR code's there.
Carbon_the_wolf on Telegram. Back to you.
Okay. Can you hear me, Dr. Plant? Okay. First off, an apology because I actually asked this question to your face a couple of years ago, and in typical style for me, I totally airmailed what you said. But I'm going to ask it here because I think this is a good context for it. When you're doing the type of study that you're doing, mathematically or otherwise, how do you compensate for the likelihood that you're not sampling a segment of humanity, but you're sampling the segment of humanity that is extrovert enough to answer surveys. How do you compensate for that?
The answer is you don't. So this is one of the drawbacks to doing quantitative research. We admit full up, right up front, there are no perfect samples. No matter how you try to sample, you will inevitably systemically miss people. By virtue of going to conventions, we're missing people who can't afford to go to conventions, who are too shy to go to conventions, who are too new to the fandom to go to conventions, who are too young to go to conventions. We try to compensate for that by using an online survey as well. So we've started doing mixed methodology. So if we can't get you at a convention, we recruit through our social media page. We recruited in the past on VR chat. So we try to sort of get the words out. We've had people sort of spread links to our surveys through Telegram groups and stuff. And even then, we're still missing out. We're missing out on the 70-year-old furry who doesn't use technology anymore and who doesn't, go to conventions. We're still missing them. We're missing out on people who don't trust academics, right? So inevitably, that's one of the limitations. And this is one of the reasons why you never rely on a single methodology or a single source or a single study to draw your conclusions. You try whenever possible to get converging methodology and converging types of studies, right? So I would love to see other people do ethnographies to test these ideas, or to do more focus groups or one-on-one interviews, or find other ways. So we don't want to claim that ours is the definitive answer to this question, but rather sort of one kick at the cat, so to speak, one attempt at trying to answer. I'm a cat, I'm allowed to say it. One attempt to answer this question, and time will tell if other people through other methodologies find consistent results. But you're right, it's a blind spot, and there's no real way, unless someone can propose an alternative method to sample that doesn't have that problem. And we're all ears if people have other suggestions for reaching those people.
Okay, terrific. Yes, in the back. And if you could actually come up, yes, thank you.
Hey, this is a question that I know, it was probably 7 or 8 years ago that, I'm asking Nuka, by the way, that I know that you have been asked maybe 7 or 8 years ago at an Anthrocon panel, but I'm curious if there has emerged any sort of just trending that's tied specifically to species of chosen fursona.
So trending in terms of does it tell you something about the person, or just changes in which ones are most popular?
I mean specifically in terms of some sort of trend that is associated specifically with a given species.
So we get asked this a lot, and I always feel like I've failed somehow, because the answer is almost always no. You would think so. You would think that there are differences between cat and dog furries. You would think there are differences between the wolves and the foxes. And what we find are incredibly tiny, very, very, very tiny differences, where wolves are slightly more likely to describe themselves as social. Foxes are slightly more likely to describe themselves as promiscuous. But these are tiny differences. The two most robust ones that we found, one is that kangaroo furries are more likely to be from Australia. Surprise, surprise. But the second one, the more exciting one, most recently, protogens in VR chat. About 10% of VR chat users are protogens. So I don't want to say that all protogens are VR chat users, but this is one of the few really resilient associations that we found with a species. And protogen users and VR chat users are continuing to go up. Protogens, as of this past survey this summer, protogens are now in the top 10 most popular species. So they're coming up fast. We also occasionally will see this. We need bigger numbers to be able to sort of confirm it, but hyenas being associated with both BIPOC folks and with trans folks as well. Hyenas have a lot of symbolism associated with them in this fandom, everything from punk culture to BIPOC culture to trans culture. There's a lot of overlap between some of these things. So yeah, but the short answer is most people are disappointed. Not as big an association as you would hope.
Okay, well, thank you.
All right, and I'd like to remind people that we do have also online questions. So those of you who are online, I'm speaking to the camera, not just God. We do have a question online. I'm going to go online again for Tim. Was there ever discussion of a rotational, i.e. set locations in a few select countries instead of a traveling con or a purely stationary one? In other words, if I understand the question correctly, a group of, say, 3 or 4 or 5 or whatever n is, and just moving around those specific ones for Eurofurence.
As far as I can tell from the discussions had on like the Eurofurence mailing lists, I don't believe that was ever raised. I wouldn't have been surprised if there was ever a discuss. If there was ever, well, yeah, I wouldn't have been surprised if like Germany, the Netherlands, and Sweden had rotations because during the 10-year period, those 3 countries appeared to be the most dedicated. In fact, there were some mentions of like maybe going back to Sweden or the Netherlands at some point. But no, I don't think there was ever an opportunity. I don't think there was ever an utterance of say a rotational system.
Okay, thank you. Anybody else here in the room? Yes.
Can I quickly follow up with a question on that, actually, for
Please,
Tim?
go for it.
Tim, super quick question to follow up on that. Do you think that if they decided today, oh, let's go back to a rotational thing, do you think that would be a lot harder, if not impossible today, because there are now established, like, going to Sweden, because there is now a Nordic FuzzCon, do you think that would make it easier or harder to do the traveling convention system?
Oh, that's a good question. I would argue it'd be a bit. I would argue it'd be a bit easier now. The big challenge that Eurofurence had when they were a traveling system was that we didn't have enough. There weren't enough furries from other countries who were either experienced or had the drive to host a convention in their own country. But now we basically have now we have at least one convention in a lot of the biggest European countries. I mean, to go back to like, I don't know if they maybe if they held on to a bit more time, or if they actually waited until the fandom got a little bit more populated, and that they could have tried it again. I know for like Worldcon, it took about maybe 8-9 years before they actually got a convention held in another country. And with the Eurocon, that was only started in like the early 70s, where there was already 30 years of established international presence in science fiction fandom. I say presently that it'd be more likely to be possible. The only slight hesitancy I have is how many of the experienced furries who run conventions want to take time to run an additional convention that might only happen once every few years. I don't know. We do seem to have a lot of dedicated people within the furry fandom just for running conventions.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Yes, your question.
This is a question for Dr. Plant or Nuka.
Could you speak up a little?
This is a question for Dr. Plant or Nuka. I just want to ask, and this is definitely a question made in mind with Theorens in mind. Are there any interesting trends you've noticed regarding spirituality in the fandom?
So trends specifically. So we know that when we've done our studies on it, and I admit, I'm definitely not a religious studies scholar, so the way we've looked into spirituality and religiosity is horrifically lackluster. And I know that some person who studied this would absolutely slap us down, because it essentially boils down to like 1 to 7 scale, how religious are you? 1 to 7 scale, how spiritual are you? And it turns out there's more nuance to it than that. We've also occasionally gone with open-ended questions. It's like, describe your spirituality. The short version is that we tend to find that the religiosity or the religious leaning of the furry is largely a product of what young people in that region of the world tend to adopt. So if you're in a part of the world where there's a lot of Buddhists, you'll see more Buddhist furries. If you go to a part of the world that's deeply secular, you'll find a lot of secular furries. If you go down in the deep southern US where you tend to find more Christian folks, you'll find more Christian furries. We've found a little bit of interesting data about like how, you know, some deeply religious furries might sort of try to reconcile their furry identity with their spiritual identity. Sometimes these things are at odds. Other times they say it's not a problem at all. Nothing systemic. So I'll say as a social psychologist, largely what we look for are consistencies or trends across large groups of people, like what holds constant across groups. It's contingent for other scholars who look at all the nuance and the details that we kind of brush away to try to find trends. They would be more likely to tell you about some of the more interesting nitty-gritty details about all of that. But from what we've been able to find, not a lot of trends. Yeah, I wish I could say more, but we kind of just collect it demographically, but we haven't found much associated with it. So, except the region of the world you happen to be in.
Okay. I see that one person has been a trendsetter and come up to the mic preemptively, so go ahead. And that's actually not a bad system.
Thank you for telling me I'm a trendsetter. Hi. Question for the Furkeley folks. You talked a lot about how your club really amplifies like the overall student culture. You participate in a lot of cool things, and it's really awesome. But one thing I was curious about is like, what does that amplify specifically with like your guys' relation to other clubs on the campus or like the organized events they hold? You're alluded, you guys are a very big part of Berkeley Game Days now. And I know UC Berkeley is a pretty historic campus, so there's a lot of culture there to play into with your club.
Yeah, I think I can take that one. So there are, I think, around 1,400 clubs on the university campus. So when it comes to doing collaborations and stuff like that, we do have to be fairly conservative with who we pick. But a lot of it happens to be collaborations with groups that represent, I think, a lot of our community. So organizations that are queer or artistically oriented, collaborations like that.
Could you speak up a little bit?
Sorry. Collaborations like that. For things like Game Day, I think the furry community is really great at catching eye. So sometimes all you have to do is just bring a couple people in their fursuits, and you can get a lot of attention that way. Yeah, and then you're on the news.
Now, a follow-up question. You said 1,400 clubs. How many students in total?
About 40,000.
Okay.
Yeah. Most of those clubs, I think, have like a very small number of people. If it's mostly consulting clubs, yeah.
Consulting clubs. What?
Consulting clubs, so people who do graphic design for Google or something like that.
Ah, okay.
For free.
Okay. But before we get to you, I just want to do a survey of the room. Are there other questions waiting? Okay. I think the lineup at the mic then works. If there's any reason you can't or don't want to come up to a mic, raise your hand and I'll call on you and stick you in the queue. Go ahead.
For Nuka, I appreciate I think it was like a focus case studies that Furscience did for the autism community. I especially appreciate the recommendations. I've been putting together some neurodiversity meet and greets at, lifted that straight from your recommendations, well, Furscience recommendations. Any other autism-specific studies in the pipeline that you know of?
In the pipeline, no, and there's an unfortunate reason for that. It's because one of the scholars on our team who primarily does the work with the autism community, so Dr. Elizabeth Fine, who is both our resident clinician and specialist in autism, she's sort of, I don't want to say she's not retiring or anything, but she's moving away from furry research to do other research on autism. So we've kind of lost her. We had our claws in her for a while and she left. We're still interested in doing it, but the problem is in academia, there's kind of an obligation to stay in your lane, and when you start to veer too far outside your lane, you get slapped down. And none of us on the team right now are clinicians, so there's kind of an open, hey, if anyone's an expert in this and wants to help us bolster our clinical / neurodivergence expertise, we're always looking for people to help. So yeah. So nothing in the pipeline right now. I don't know if you saw Dr. Fine published in the Furscience book, we have a whole chapter on neurodiversity there. I'm guessing you've probably seen it. Yeah, okay, yeah. So nothing new since then, unfortunately.
Thank you.
Yep.
Ian?
Hi, this question is for Nuka as well. First, somebody from Furscience said my name. That's super cool. I'm a big fan of your paper, Optimal Distinctiveness and Identification within the Furry Fandom. That paper discusses quite a bit this idea of like, need for psychological connection. Can you talk a little bit about how this new paper interacts with the notion of like psychological connection or affiliation within the fandom? In relationship to this new topic of like loneliness that you've brought up, and I can't wait to read the paper.
Yes. Okay. I gotta say, first of all, when you mentioned optimal distinctiveness in your talk, I squealed. I'm like, ah! So I was very, very excited to see that. I'm like, yes, someone mentioned optimal distinctiveness. So yes, it's near and dear to my heart. I actually hadn't thought about how it pertains specifically to this idea, but it definitely does. So for those who don't know, just to backfill really quickly. Optimal distinctiveness is the idea that we have two competing needs fighting inside of you. There's two wolves, and they're both competing in different ways. The one wolf, we're using furry examples here. The one wolf wants to be distinct, wants to be a lone wolf, wants to stand out. Like all the time that you want to stand out from the crowd and be different, that's one need that you have. But on the other hand, you have this other need to belong to the safety of the group. And so in every person, we're wrestling simultaneously with the desire to be a distinct individual, but also with the desire to fit in the group. So we like to fit in, but not too much. We don't want to fit in to the point that we're a face of this drone, but we also don't want to stand out too much, right? You don't want to be the one person standing there in your underwear in a crowd full of fully dressed people going, uh-oh, did I miss a memo somewhere, right? So that's optimal distinctiveness in a nutshell. Is different people strike that balance in different ways, right? Have a different need to stand out more, or different need to sit in more. And I suspect my hunch would be that for people for whom optimal distinctiveness is they lean more heavily towards the need to fit in. I think they would be the folks who are the most likely, I think, to they have a bigger need to fit in, so they're more likely to feel this absence of people if bullied or ostracized, and therefore would be the most likely to find comfort, to find solace in stories or pets or anything involving non-human animals. Being anthropomorphized. So that would be my hunch. We didn't measure it, but if I had to run a study and put down $50 on a hypothesis, that's what I would guess. And then you were asking more specifically about identity. We sort of had a little bit of that built into the study. We didn't ask about it necessarily directly, but we did have items asking about identification with your fursona, for example, or identification as a furry. And so the idea, the pathways, sort of how I think about it in my head is stereotypically, kid gets bullied, they're ostracized, humans suck, so I turn to stories and movies featuring non-human characters, and I find comfort and solace in that. And then, hey, I find a group of people who also like that, so I identify with it. It becomes an important part of my identity that I'm a part of this group who share this thing that I have in common. And hey, I have a chance now to identify as these characters that I idolize so much, or maybe I feel a sense of kinship or connect with them, right? I read stories when I was a kid, and walking, talking cat people, that's my jam. These are my people. And so now that I have the resources to it, I create a fursona, I create a fursuit. And again, I do not want to trivialize anyone's fursona or say that this is the only path to it, or that this is just a defense mechanism. This is just one way that a person may develop a fursona or have a fursona manifest. So by no means the only way. I don't know if I fully answered your question. Please come up and yell at me if I did not.
He's nodding his head. So it's all
Okay.
good. I see one more question here, but before we do that, I'm going to do one from online, and then you'll be the last one, and then we'll get to our drugs. This question online, by the way, the two earlier online questions were from Eduardo, who did the stickers talk. One was about starting your own furry club, and the other was about rotating Eurofurence. And this one is also for you, Tim. And it's from Vanguard, one of the organizers for this. So I just want to give Vanguard a little round of applause. Vanguard unfortunately couldn't be here today, but he's always very helpful, and he's one of the organizers. What else can I say? But anyway, his question is silly little question for Tim. History of the furry fandom in mainland Europe when? Mainland Europe.
God. Yeah, Vanguard's been aware of me since I published a book called Britannia, The History of the Furry Fandom in the United Kingdom. Mainland Europe, thank you. I did well, funny enough, this talk, funny enough, it started a couple of years ago when I decided I would have a shot of it. Decided to do a shot of doing a talk on like furries of a history of furries of Europe as a whole. I called it the 32 years of European furries, and it went through not just Eurofurence, but also like early examples of like furries in like mainland Europe and the UK, how other conventions in Europe got started, all the way up to present day, and that one took a lot because in part because I had like less time to talk about way more. I had more conventions to talk about in a space of an hour, but fewer. But I had less time to talk about each one of them. But apparently that talk did rather well because I ended up getting approached by some of the people who attended the first Eurofurence and got talking to them, and they even gave me a lot more resources, which eventually led to me doing this paper, Eurofurence the first 10 years. As a question of whether I do a entire book on furry mainland Europe, I don't know if I don't know. Can people read books that are like 200,000 words or more? There's a lot to get through.
Okay, thank you. And we have our last question right here.
Which mic?
This one.
Hi, I'm Kai. My question's also for Tim. I was wondering your process or your methodology for collating the history of Eurofurence, how that history is kept, and perhaps relatedly, what you observed with like unity or continuing camaraderie amongst those original furries. There's like the what you mentioned about the house con really resonated with how sort of my own like friend groups have functioned, and I'm curious if those are the same cadres that they're continuing to work and collaborate, and and if they're the history keepers, or how else you were able to compile that information, that history.
Thank you for your question. So with Eurofurence, they already have a good start in which they're very good at archiving their past conventions. They actually have. You can actually go to a special page on their website, archive.eurofurence.org, and it basically gives you like you can basically have a look at like all the websites of all the past Eurofurences. They'll also provide like PDFs of their con books. Some of them will provide videos. Some will provide like the daily Eurofurence newsletter that they would publish and hand out on the day. Unfortunately, apart from that, that's kind of the exception. I think Nordic FirstCon also does good archiving of their past conventions, but other than that, it was a lot of my research had to go through like archived websites, tracking down con books, tracking down the original organizers and attendees from the time. Some if you had access to web forums and some discussions from there. But for this talk, one of the big helps was one of the Eurofurence attendees who I saw at Eurofurence, Herger. He luckily still had a full archive the original Eurofurence mailing lists that they used to discuss plans for the early Eurofurences. So I would like to say I'd be hopeful and say that there's a lot more there's a lot more accessible resources for history, but it's usually up to you to being able to find the right people and being able to talk with and share your interest and more knees deep forms of archival work.
Okay, and actually, if I may throw in my own 2 cents, for those of you who don't know about it, there's a Telegram group called Furry Preservation, and the address is Furry Preservation. And if you're interested in such things, join it because it's great, it's active, it does a lot of things that are connected with what we do with Furry Studies. As it turns out, our timing is perfect. It is now 3:30. We'll have a coffee break until 3:45, and then we'll come back for session 3, which will be led by our own Hazel. Thank you very much to everybody who took part.